You can't do racial equity work if you can't talk about race. If you can't talk about race, you can't deal with the racially oppressed, marginalized student populations that are not being educated. But you represent hundreds of thousands of children who are being disserved. And we got to change that right here. To observe it, to learn, to grow, to learn, to love. Schools have to be loving places. And so I offer some tools to get there, to make that transition work. And so as you look at the Courageous Conversation Compass, it gives you a way of processing your life, figuring out where you're located. And for so many of us, we get trapped in the failing quadrant.
I promise you I'll be brief. I promise you, and like a lot of my colleagues across the country who say as professional superintendents, they are not political, I will be political. And I promise you this, that anything I say can be verified against the data, the media in our community and beyond. I am tired of being tired of listening to people who promise change to public education in America, but they speak about it so much they actually believe they did some of it. I am tired of people who have never traveled the dangerous, lonely road of elevating somebody's dignity simply by kneeling down and seeing a child eye to eye, but promise to improve the world for us by changing the way we teach and the way we learn, even though they have never spent a minute in a classroom. I am tired of the hecklers that from the safety of their stands criticize what you and I do, even they have no clue about how to do it better. And I am tired of those who believe that somehow our nation can become great or greater, other through investing, not spending, investing in children. And here's my promise to you and advice as school board members: fire the superintendents that do not produce in 1 or 2 years. Because those who have you believe that sustainable education reform takes 10 years to roll out, all they're doing is lying to you. They have no idea how to do it.
Now, Milton Friedman, whom I talked about, he said very clearly, the point of school choice was to abolish the public school system. It wasn't about civil rights. It was that privately conducted schools can develop exclusively white schools and exclusively colored schools. So they knew that when they created a market-based approach to schools, that it would segregate schools. They knew that from the very beginning. So the question is, what does the data look like? So just allow me to be a professor for just a moment here. You probably have not seen this graph before, but this is what happened in New Orleans over 10 years. Now, a lot of people will say that New Orleans is a smashing success story. How many people have heard that? That New Orleans is a smashing success story. And that everything that New Orleans is doing, we should do lots of other places. So Linda Darling-Hammond has a brand new study on New Orleans. And what does this graph show happened to the enrollment in different tiered schools? So the tier 1 schools, those are the schools that are performing the highest. Those are the preferential schools in the market. Then you see on the right, the lowest performing schools. So who is going to the highest performing schools in New Orleans after 10 years? And who is going to the schools that are the lowest performing schools after 10 years? This is what happens in a market, is that students become more segregated, and they continue to be segregated in C, D, and F schools. How many of you have heard of the Credo studies? Well, I'm about to give you ammunition that will destroy any conversations about the Credo studies. Here's 3. First, if you look at the impact of charter schools, and they like to talk about the 2015 study, the impact for African Americans is 0.05. That's 0.05 of a standard deviation. For Latinos, the impact of charters is 0.008. That's 0.008 of a standard deviation. Things like class size reduction have 400% more impact. Things like pre-K, the superintendent talked about universal pre-K, have almost a 0.5 impact, 1,000% more impact. So they're not actually lying to you when they say that charter schools have a positive impact on Black and Latino students, but the impact is so small you need a telescope to see it. Now, there's two other things to know about that study. One, they only compare, it's not a comparison of schools, it's a comparison of students that go to schools. And so they compare a charter student to an imaginary student. Now, I had an imaginary friend, this is a true story. I had an imaginary friend when I was 6. His name was Lee. I was an only kid at the time. Now, what Credo does, and I had 8 stats classes at Stanford, so this is my responsibility to society to tell you these things, which is that they compare it to 8 students and create an imaginary student from public schools. But they don't look at all public schools. They only look at schools that sent charter school students, which what it does is it narrows the schools that they're comparing them to, the students who attend. So they stack the deck. See, and this is why Roland Martin doesn't want me on his show next week, because he's going to start talking about the Credo study, and I'm going to tell him the impact of the Credo study is 0.05 on African American students.
And the work that you do every day is something that we are most appreciative for. We realize the hard work that you do every day for those kids in your classroom. And today, we're going to be recognizing one of your colleagues as the winner of this year's Benjamin Elijah Mays Award. Cheryl Mays from Metro Nashville, please come forward and let's give her a round of applause.
I'll tell you why I do what I do. I do what I do for Sierra. Sierra is a young woman who was part of our summer internship program that we bring high school students into our Nissan plant, and we put them with engineers to teach them about what they would be doing when they become engineers, because I know they're going to succeed. Sierra was one of the first young women that we had in this program, and 2 days into the program, she said, "Miss Mays, can I tell you something?" And I said, "Sure." She said, "I never knew there were female engineers. And I never knew that men worked for them." We got a lot of work to do, family. At the end of that program, Sierra she's a graduating senior. At the end of that program, she came back to me and she said, "Guess what happened to me? I got a 4-year academic scholarship to FSU. And she said, a lot of it was based on my GPA, but the reason they accepted me was because of my participation in that summer internship program." So we're doing our work.
So what is the state of urban education in school districts across the country? Sometimes the challenges are overwhelming, and the ills that typically flow, high crime, high poverty, are the reflections of inequities in race and class. And so the state of urban education is tied to the state of our economy. It really is. In our political structure and our social contract. The challenges are driven by the ridiculous, unconscionable notion that some children deserve more than others, or less than others, because of the color of their skin, the zip code they came from, or the country they were born in. I say not. And so we've all heard the statistics. We get more and more data about inequity. Resources between affluent and non-affluent schools. Who get the least experienced teachers? We know who they are, right? Our babies. So why are children suspended more than other students? They want us to believe that our children are not worthy. And I'm going to tell you, as school board members, sometimes we fall into the trap. We don't mean to, because we love our children. But we fall into that trap, board superintendent trap. I'm going to go there for just like half a second. So superintendents are the educational leaders of the school district. You had better be the visionary leaders of the school district, or our kids will fail. Because the superintendent can't do it all. It's teamwork. And if equity doesn't come out of the mouth of your superintendent, I'm moving on. So as I think about the state of urban education, I think about the inequities that abound, the board superintendent teams that don't get out of their own ways, inadequate funding, lack of resources, misuse, misdirection, mishandling of resources, the teachers who immensely care about those students and those who could care less about them. Why are they still there? And so when we talk about equality and equity, sometimes I think we're really misguided about what it means to put children above politics. Because you know what that means to me? It means you're willing to risk your position. It means you are willing to not be at that board table. It actually means you're willing to lose something that you might have had that was guaranteed to you. Are you willing to take the risk for our kids? So the politics of education is complex. It's this interrelationship among politicians and unions and boards and the knowledge industry. And so this complex puzzle, at its worst, we can't figure out where the pieces fit. And so with all that said, what can we do? We're here because CUBE is about equipping boards with the gear to better serve our students. And when I think of CUBE, I think about how we have this goal of focusing on connecting school districts that have similar challenges. Our districts are all too often disproportionately represented, yes, in jails and prisons. And so we have an obligation to be obstructionists when it's necessary.
So we're going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in the transgender space across the country. I'm going to give you a bit of a legal overview so you know what's happening across the country. Then we're going to turn to Jacinto to talk about his experience dealing with the political atmosphere around one particular school district's experiences in Texas. They happen to have taken a position in opposition to what the state is instructing. And then we're going to talk to Dr. Scribner a little bit about some of those operational realities and what they've faced and what they've achieved and what they're experiencing going forward.
Then we had to ask ourselves, and it was a gut check, am I really about all children? And that was a personal reflection. I remember asking my wife at night. I said, I can go toe-to-toe with people about race. I've had these conversations with you. We want to go through the stages. We want to talk about the social constructs of race. I can go toe-to-toe with anybody on that subject matter. But I really wasn't as prepared with this subject matter. And my implicit bias was in full effect. And I, as one board member, had to decide, what do we as a collective board decide to do? And that scared the living heck out of me because Fort Worth has been known as an explosive board as well, and not one that sticks together. But what kept us focused on the task at hand was having steady leadership, having the belief that what we were doing was right, and it needed to be done, regardless of what the media and what everybody was saying. And we stuck to it. And thank goodness that to this point, this board did not falter when it came to making that decision. We had people come to our board meetings. We have a 60-minute time limit. The first night when this happened, it's a record turnout. We got Dr. T.A. Sims, 30-year-plus veteran. He said he had never seen that many people. We had a line wrapped around outside the building. We had helicopters flying around. We had police all over the place. And the room was about to explode because if someone would speak on behalf of this subject matter, you'd have ministers sitting behind him saying, you had a gentleman who said, I'm gay. I'm saying do the right thing. When I was a kid, I wanted to kill myself because I was gay and I wasn't accepted by society. And you've got a minister sitting behind him saying, can you try that again, please? We had that kind of stuff happening in our boardroom, that it was just low enough for enough people to hear. And this is the part that I'll give you. When we started that meeting that night, and before I opened it up for public comment, I said, please be mindful and remember the children are watching us tonight. And how we conduct ourselves will speak volumes as to what we as a Fort Worth community are about.
This very moment, 44% of black children under 6 live in poverty in the richest nation in the history of the world. That's a moral disgrace. That's spiritually profane. Where are the voices that are concerned about it. Where's the righteous indignation? Where's the holy anger? Don't find it too much among the politicians. Used to find it in the churches. Used to find it in the mosques, in the synagogues. No, well, what has happened? The spiritual decline and decay has set in because big money and obsession with cupidity and venality of people willing to sell their souls for a mess of pottage and no longer tell the truth and no longer lift as they climb, no longer focus on what needs to be focusing on because it's so easy to get caught up in the gold rush. And if life is viewed as a gold rush, you're going to end up worshiping the golden calf. That's why when I go into these groups with these young brothers and sisters, I say, do you know what tradition you all come from? Do you understand what went into the making and the shaping of your parents and your grandparents? But oftentimes our young folk are what? They're lost. They're rootless. They're deracinated. They're wrestling with lovelessness and carelessness and hopelessness and touchlessness. They haven't been touched enough. Shoot, I couldn't make it through Shiloh Baptist Church without a hug every Sunday.
I am grateful to have an incredible school board that works collaboratively with me, is visionary, and has at the main point a concern about students. And so I'd like to introduce Catherine Ushka, who's in the audience. She was able to come. Wave, Catherine, thank you. And Board President Karen Vial.
Thank you, Superintendent Santorno. It is truly an honor for us to be here and to receive this award. When I was a young person, my dad once told me, don't expect to be patted on the head for doing what's right. But I can tell you when you are, it feels very good, and we want to thank you so much, Cube, for giving us this great honor.
Can anyone recall a presidential election in which education has not been discussed to the degree this has? That's not to say that the other elections really address the sorts of issues you face every day. But, you know, both candidates spoke in Detroit, made major speeches in Detroit, which has the lowest literacy rate for children in the United States and has for the last 4 times for marking periods, and education wasn't even mentioned by either of them, nor was it mentioned in the debate.
I want to, again, remind you that the Every Student Succeeds Act gives you the opportunity, because if it's going to fall back down on you at the local school board members, even though you're not on that committee making the decisions of what's going to make it to the last plan, if it doesn't work out, it's going to come back to you. And that's why I urge you to go back to your district, go back to your state, get on that committee, provide some input, but make sure that you're working with your parents and do authentic parent engagement. And that can look different in different places, and we know that a lot of parents may not have been invited before, and so you might need to start at that very basic of, what is the purpose of education? Do you know whether your student is an English language learner? Do you know what that means? What supports you need to have at home? And so it's gonna be a process of educating parents to then even get them to the point of knowing what to ask and demand what they need for their children.